Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica and our continuing series Retro Revamp Rewind, where I take a look at some of my previous videos I've done on the channel years ago when I had a smaller audience, and the number one video I've been getting requests for is to take another look at Buriki One on the Hyper Neo Geo 64 because it is such a unique fighting game. And now with improvements in MAME, this game is relatively playable, and the audio has a lot of glitches, but you can complete it from start to finish. I tested it before I did this video, and while there's still a few graphical glitches, you can enjoy the entire experience from start to finish. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe with that notification bell, it definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we have a Patreon link down below in the description as well. But I would say that Buriki One is the most unique game on the Hyper Neo Geo 64 because we have two traditional arcade racing games, we have 4 fighting games, and we have Beast Busters being a light gun game. But the two Samurai Showdown games and Fatal Fury Wild Ambition play exactly like you would expect them to, but Buriki One has a completely different setup that is intriguing and one of the only times I've ever seen it done in a fighting game. Usually your buttons are your attacks and your arcade stick is your movement. In Buriki One that is completely the opposite. You have 2 buttons. One makes you go backwards and one makes you go forward. And the control stick, the arcade stick itself, is how you attack your opponents. You have 8 directions, and depending on how you thrust that stick and kind of the combos you put in, your player is going to have different attacks. It's a really interesting system, and it really helps you connect fully with your fighter, because when you really slam the arcade stick back, charge it, and then push it forward quickly for the right timing to get a big haymaker out, it really does feel like you are just punching the ever-loving hell out of your opponent. There's different jabs you can do, different sticks and pokes, charged attacks, you can avoid attacks. It's a very unique fighting system that you're only going to find in Buriki One. And now thankfully that it is working in MAME relatively well, everyone can experience this because this was never ported off the Hyper Neo Geo 64 and it didn't really do very well. I don't even believe Buriki One came to the United States. I believe it was a Japanese exclusive. I've never seen an English copy, mine is Japanese. But you'll see there you can knock your opponent out into the ring. It doesn't do anything except slow down the match. You have a heart meter. As that heart starts racing, your opponent will die from it. Not really die, but just get knocked out. But each individual character has their own fighting style. I'm using Rob here because I really prefer the boxing mechanic, but it's a unique layout. Every different situation opens up different attacks for you. If you're in a grapple, there's an attack that you have that you cannot use when you're not in a grapple. If you're facing away from your opponent because you got knocked back, there are certain things you can do control-wise that are only available in that situation. But this is a very timing-heavy game. You need to attack at the right time with the right attack, because if you whiff that haymaker, you 100% leave yourself open to a charged attack from your enemy that'll knock a quarter, if not half, of your life bar away. So you really need to get into the rhythm of this game. In some ways, it actually feels like a rhythm game and less of a fighting game. Of course, you have your inputs and you have to beat your opponent, but the timing of how you do that is the most important thing moving forward in the game. But I would say graphically this game is also outstanding. I absolutely love it, and I would say it's probably the best looking game on the Hyper Neo Geo 64. These are detailed, relatively high polygon models with a lot of good texture work, because this was one of the later games for the Hyper Neo Geo 64 after SNK got a real handle on how to use the hardware compared to some of the earlier games on the system looking decent but not great. But it's just a really unique game from a company that was known for fighting games. They decided they were going to try something completely different and try to revamp the way that they created a fighter, and I think it works really well. The saddest part of Buriki One though is how few people have actually gotten a chance to experience this game. When I did a video on it originally, maybe a year and a half, almost 2 years ago now, most people had either never heard of it or heard of it and never played it. It was only maybe 2 or 3 people that had gotten a chance to play this game. But now the great thing is, with these functioning better in MAME, and MAME emulation probably still improving maybe by the time this video is out, it's going to be accessible to more people. And you'll see there when I was on the ground, I had to quickly evade, and that's the situation where depending on what your stance is, you have different options available to you, because the fighter that I'm fighting, Tendo Guy, has more of an aerial attack situation going on, so you do get options to attack that you normally wouldn't when you're facing different opponents. Some attacks seem to be opponent specific. Otherwise, the soundtrack is quite interesting, although it's a little bit subdued. It's mostly just crowd noises, but go ahead and listen to a match for like 20 seconds and then watch the amazing intro to the final match of the game, and I'll come back and tell you more about why you should check it out in MAME. Otherwise, enjoy.
Hyper versus Star. Ready, fight! The winner is Hyper. In the red corner, Hyper. In the blue corner, Heating.
I just love that intro. It feels like you're watching a WWE ring entrance. I will say though, the final boss, Silber, is a gigantic pain in the ass. When I'm playing this game, sometimes I beat him on the first match, other times he beats me 10 times in a row until I can beat him, and sometimes I just can't beat him whatsoever. But that's pretty much SNK tradition at this point in time. The final boss is going to be so much more difficult than the rest of the game. But I just love Buriki One. It is so unique and it is so different. It was SNK playing around with the traditional fighting game formula and creating something that I think is really unique and special and should be experienced by more people. And I know that Hyper Neo Geo obviously gets bagged on for not having great graphics, and of course for 1998 you did have stuff like Sega Model 3 out, but all of the background visuals are impressive, all the texture work is good, those 2D flame effects on those pyres there look really nice, and the character models have plenty of polygons, so it's really not too fair to say the Hyper Neo Geo looked terrible. It just wasn't as powerful as the Model 3, but the hardware new when it was sold was also much less expensive than the Model 3, so you really can't fault SNK for trying to come in at a better price point, because that's what they did with the MVS in arcades. But yeah, I mean, this is working relatively well in MAME. You can play Buriki One from start to finish and really get a sense of how that control scheme works, and I can't recommend you do it enough. But leave me a comment down below. Have you ever played Buriki One and seen it in arcade? I'd be quite curious. I'll be back with an episode of Retro Revamp Rewind when I feel like it, because that's how the series works, and I'll have videos throughout the week as well. But thanks so much for watching, guys. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.